Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party. And joining Jesse and myself is our good friend, notable host, the great political commentator, essayist, and attorney, Eric Levine. So, Eric, you and I just had the distinct pleasure of being at a luncheon, which you sponsored in terms of your Levine forums, with a major figure in the Israeli army, now retired, but now still a reservist, who was talking to us about the whole situation in Israel. And the first thing I want to talk about, because it does relate, and he said it very, very well, Eric, is we've been talking, the three of us, about the world at war, and we've always been concerned about, is America abdicating its leadership responsibilities and therefore making the world a much more dangerous place? And it seemed to me that the general's comments really addressed that. Could you tell our listeners his message today?
Well, as a general matter, he sees the war in Israel, and I believe he's correct, in the post-October 7th, as a clash of cultures. There's a war between cultures. There's the war between the East and the evil of China, Russia, and Iran, and that axis of evil, and the West and freedom, allegedly and supposedly and historically led by the United States. And the winner of that clash of civilizations is going to depend upon American leadership. And while they are grateful, the Israelis are, for the Biden administration's support of their war effort against Hamas, they, like many other countries in the region, are horrified at the weakness that this administration has displayed. You think about it. When the Biden administration came into office, the Abraham Accords were still hot off the presses. Peace was breaking out all over. Iran was on its heels. It had $4 billion in foreign currency reserves, $4 billion, which is basically nothing for a country. And they could barely pay their proxies in Hezbollah and Hamas and in Iran and in Syria and in Iraq and in Syria. And Israel and the Sunni Arab allies were ascendant, and Iran was in trouble. Since the Biden administration has come into power, you have the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan, which convinced everyone in that region that they're on their own. The United States won't defend them. And what particularly has frightened them is the unrelenting assault on American troops in the region, for which Joe Biden makes Iran pay no price. The appeasement of Iran has completely undermined America's credibility in the region. You have the Houthis, for example, have basically closed down shipping, commercial shipping in the Red Sea. So what happens? Ships now don't go through the Suez Canal. Who does that hurt? Hurts the Egyptians, because that's one of their primary sources of income. You have October 7th, of course, is the primary example of what happens when the world is asleep or weak. But these chain of horribles that have occurred in the Middle East, despite the administration's claim to de-escalate, they don't want to expand the war. But every time they say that, the war expands. There's escalation, and America pays the price. And now we have three American dead service members in Jordan killed by an Iranian drone, manufactured in Iran. And the question is going to become, what's going to happen to Iran in response to killing Americans? And the initial signs are not good. Joe Biden has now come out and said, I don't want to expand the war. Well, every time he says he doesn't want to expand the war expands because Iran becomes more and more emboldened. Joe Biden used to like to finish all his speeches with, may God protect our troops. But the corollary to that is God helps those who help themselves. It is up to Joe Biden to defend the men and women he sends into harm's way, and he's absolutely failing. And the world concludes if the United States will not defend their own armed services, why will they defend them? And that is then exacerbated by the rift we're now starting to see between the United States and Israel in their warfare against Hamas, as the United States seems to be trying to pressure Israel into a ceasefire. This fanciful notion that there should be a two-state solution when there's no legitimate Palestinian authority that could possibly govern or hopefully control a country that would not turn into a terrorist organization. And as a result of that, China's role in the Middle East, Russia's role in the Middle East, and Iran's role in the Middle East has all been expanding. And unless and until America starts pushing back, that's only going to get worse. And it puts more and more pressure on the Israelis to have to defend Western civilization. An interesting development is what's going on in Europe. The Europeans, and this was an important point that the journal was making, the Europeans have had enough of an influx of the Muslims from the Arab world. They understand that if the Middle East explodes and if the Sunni countries fall prey to the Iranians, that there's going to be a huge outflow of Muslims from the Middle East into Europe, which will be further destabilizing of Europe. They don't want that. They want stability in the Middle East. So they have, interestingly, defunded UNRWA. That's the United Nations Workers' Relief Organization that is responsible for making sure that Palestinians live miserably in camps and not allowed to migrate so that they can use it as a weapon against the Israelis. But it has come out now that many members of UNRWA, a UN organization, participated in the October 7th assault on the Israelis. So they are now defunding, the Europeans are. They're refusing to fund UNRWA. The Trump administration had defunded it, but the Biden administration decided that it would start funding it. Because the two fallacies of the Biden administration is, one, that the only way to peace is a two-state solution. And the other is that the way to control Iran is the JCPOA. Neither works.
Which that was the nuclear deal.
Yeah, it's the nuclear deal. They're absolutely counterproductive. I mean, think about it. On October 6th, the Saudis and the Israelis were very close to a normalization agreement, with the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords. And there absolutely was not required that there be a Palestinian state. 1978, the Egyptians made peace with the Israelis. 1994, the Jordanians made peace with the Israelis. Then you had the Abraham Accords in 2019 with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. None of those peace agreements required a Palestinian state. Now, all of a sudden, after October 7th, the Biden administration has decided to impose this notion that the day after when the war ends, must include a Palestinian state. That puts tremendous pressure on Saudi Arabia. They can't be seen as being less supportive of the Palestinian cause than an American president. Now, lo and behold, a Palestinian state is a prerequisite to normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis, which will guarantee there will not be in the near future an agreement between Israel and the Saudis, because there's not going to be a two-state solution. The Saudis don't want it because they know that any Palestinian state would be radicalized and would be overrun by the Muslim Brotherhood or the Hamas, which would be a direct threat to them. The Israelis are not going to allow it because they're not going to have a terrorist state on their border. So there'll be no Palestinian state. There'll be no peace agreement, no normalization in the near future between the Israelis and the Saudis, and the Israelis will be blamed.
Well, let me give you my thoughts, then I want to get Jesse's thoughts. When I was listening to the journal, it confirmed to me my biggest concern, which is the abdication of leadership by America and its intent upon fostering upon Israel and other countries, including the Ukraine, their vision of what should be done in defending their own homelands. And that's a real problem, because there's already noise out there that there should be a ceasefire. Ceasefire under what terms and conditions? To allow them, Hamas, a terrorist organization, to stay in place, allowing them a leadership position in a post-war environment, a two-state solution that allows them, once again, to build tunnels and armaments and take Iranian military equipment and strategy and advisors to wage an everlasting war against Israel. And as the generals pointed out, and Jesse and Eric and I have pointed out, this really is a war of civilization. This is a war of cultures. There's a great British historian who used to say it is a war of civilizations. And the Islamic Brotherhood is a threat not just to Western Europe and to the United States and to Israel, but it's a threat to the so-called moderate Arab states that fear the Muslim Brotherhood taking them over. So this is a very, very big deal, and it has to be dealt with. And the last point I'll make is this, and I want to get Eric. We've had Eric's thoughts and my thoughts. I want to get Jesse's. I asked the general today, I said, I don't trust the American regime under Biden to do the right thing. They're already hinting about slowing down the supply of both money and armaments and weaponry to the Israelis. That pushes a lot of pressure on Israel. Israel is not going to allow themselves to be exterminated. So that only escalates the response from Israel, doesn't lessen the response. If they think they're going to browbeat the Israelis into giving up, you're just going to make them use more advanced military options to protect themselves.
You would think at some point the administration would say, what we're doing is getting the exact opposite result of what we're attempting to achieve. So maybe we should change course. But these people are so obtuse, it's just not happening.
Jesse, your thoughts?
I don't know how much I could add because I agree with both of your assessments. They were expert in the way you described it. But perhaps, and I wasn't there today, the way I see it, and maybe I could ask this of Eric and yourself, is that after October 7th, there was a strong energy from the administration in support of Israel, which has since waned. And the only way I can see that is maybe through my lens, which is through politics. So I wonder how much, maybe this was discussed, or maybe from your research from both of you, how much presidential politics is playing into this? Because one thing we've seen, and you could almost put it down on a map and point out the dates and times where the Biden administration's backing off of their support of Israel, fully throated and with all the support, both in aid and with military support, that it happened there were key groups within essential demographics for Biden's successful presidency, whether it be the left, the progressives in his party, like the Squad, and them sending their threats politically to the Biden administration, or in some cases where we've seen some of the youth vote expressing a dissatisfaction with his initial policies. I wonder how much, and maybe you guys can share with our listeners what was said, if at all, presidential politics is playing in now into foreign policy for the Biden administration, which is leading to this failure.
That's an excellent point, Jesse. I have to say, I believe from my point of view that when Biden looks around, he's afraid of losing votes. And remember, in our system of government under the Constitution, we have electoral college system. It's not a pure popular vote. So therefore, certain constituencies are important in certain states. And Biden is terribly afraid of losing the Muslim votes in Michigan and Minnesota, for example. That's a very big deal. The general himself was trying, as he should, to stay out of American politics. His concern is the world situation. We in the audience listening to him and under Eric's guidance try to deal with that issue, because clearly the electoral map, the electoral calendar has everything to do with what Biden is doing. Fundamentally, Biden is a political opportunist who's going to do whatever he has to, using whatever tools he has to get himself reelected, and his party is behind him. So there's no real commitment in the sense that they're going to give Israel or the Ukraine whatever is necessary and appropriate in a timely fashion to further and strengthen their hands against these aggressors. Eric.
Yeah, so the absolute explosion of anti-Semitism in the cities across our country and our college campuses are from the left. These aren't the Ku Klux Klan or the Proud Boys. These are progressives. These are Jew haters from the left. And they are a key part to Joe Biden's vote. if he's going to
Let me interrupt you for a minute there, Eric. Isn't that interesting, though, as an aside, that when it's the Proud Boys and everyone else in support of a political candidate, the mainstream media jumps all over that, Congress jumps all over that. Yet now, as you pointed out, all of these leftist groups that have spurned anti-Semitism, in many cases, actual anti-Semitism, worse than was ever perceived on the right, we hear silence.
Yeah, that's 100%, because it's not part of their narrative. It's not part of their narrative. So, but the anti-Semitism from the left is far more pervasive and far more dangerous to Jews than the anti-Semitism on the right, which absolutely exists. But there's no danger of the Ku Klux Klan taking control of the United States or its ideology becoming mainstreamed and part of government policy. Whereas on the left, you have the Squad, you have the progressive left, on these college campuses, and the disease, the cancer, because the anti-Semitism is the symptom, is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the social justice agenda, which talks about oppressor and oppressed and intersectionality. And so Israel is viewed as the Jews. So Jews are whites. Palestinians are people of color, so they're the oppressed. They could do whatever they want, anytime, anywhere, by any means necessary. And the oppressors aren't allowed to defend themselves. So you see the internationalization of the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement.
Let's take a break. We'll be back. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, Eric Levine, distinguished attorney, political commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at AmazonBusiness.com.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50. Code listen50. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey besties, listen up. I have a secret to tell you. LinkedIn now has improved the job search experience for nurses. Search by your specialty, the shifts you want to work, and the salary that you want to make. With so many employers hiring on LinkedIn, finding the perfect job is even more simplified. So don't spend months searching. Go to linkedin.com/nurses and find out why in the past year, more than 1.5 million nurses have used LinkedIn to search for their next role. That's linkedin.com/nurses.
This episode is brought to you by Hulu, presenting Paradise. Paradise is Hulu's critically acclaimed addictive drama series, starring Sterling K. Brown, Julianne Nicholson, and James Marsden. The Daily Beast calls Paradise your next TV obsession, and the New York Times says it's exhilarating in all the right ways. Paradise is for your Emmy consideration in all categories, including Outstanding Drama Series. For more information, visit fyc.hulu.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. So you had some thoughts at the break, Eric?
Yeah, so as I was saying, so these marches are the internationalization against Israel, the internationalization of the social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion movement. Israel's Jews. Jews are whites. Palestinians are people of color. They're being oppressed, and they're allowed to rise up by any means necessary. Everything's okay. And if you look at the demographic of 18 to 24-year-olds, that demographic actually, a majority of them side with Hamas against Israel. It's pretty shocking. And please do not misconstrue what I am saying. Joe Biden is not an anti-Semite. I believe he's a philo-Semite. He supports Israel. But he's also a politician. And these And the left, the progressive left, is anti-Semitic. These people protesting in the streets and at college campuses are anti-Semitic. And he needs their votes. So he's going to start, you've already seen it, he's going to start to temper his support for Israel so as not to completely alienate them so that they will vote for him. And that distancing, that rift between the United States and Israel because of domestic politics is very dangerous. But that's what we're seeing.
Jesse.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, this is like the doubling down of failed foreign policy. Now it's foreign policy by electoral map. And it's making it even worse. And it's shrinking the American leadership position globally and in these regions.
That's exactly right. All right, let's switch gears. I want to talk to you, gentlemen, about this obsession we have, the secular religion called the Green New Deal, climate change. What's happening is they fostered upon the American people this vision that the world is about to come to a terrible end because of global warming. Therefore, anything that they say is better energy policy, which means, in their views, solar and wind, is the way to get out of this crisis. They totally forget that places like Russia, India, China, Venezuela could care less about this agenda. And in fact, as was pointed out in this program before, the only ones who actually adhere to the Paris Accords are the United States of America. We have the cleanest energy, and yet we're the ones who are constantly being pushed to do more and more. They want to get rid of our gas stoves. They want to get rid of our lawnmowers, our refrigerators, anything that's geared by gas. They want to get rid of our cars. The car industry is running away from electric cars because they don't work. The dealers are telling the manufacturers they don't work. The manufacturers...
And people don't want them.
People do not want them. People want the freedom of choice. So for the Democratic left to keep saying how they're for democracy is the biggest joke in the world. I want my gas-powered car. If you want an electric car or a hybrid, God bless you, but I don't want it. And don't tell me it's going to be against the law of the state of New York or the state of California or any other state that I can't buy one because there'll be no dealerships in my state. It's ridiculous. They're not economically efficient. They don't have the grid to support them. There's real changes that have to be made with respect to the safety of these things because of the electrical fires and how you put them out and what you put them out, the pollution that comes from these electric fires. And it's not easy to put out because people are hurt putting the fire out, and then it spontaneously generates again in another hour or two. So it's a very big deal. Now, the latest salvo in this, Jesse and Eric, is that they now want to impose this new Green New Deal value system on American agriculture. So what is that going to do? That's going to cause the price of food to go up, which is inflationary. That means that it's not going to be cost-effective for the farmers to farm and to have to retrofit or get new equipment. They're not going to be able to do this. So we're running the risk of a real food desert. Jesse, what say you?
This is just, it's unfounded and it's preposterous. And anyone that needs to find out whether or not this Green New Deal is going to work or there's EV cars everywhere just has to go through their social media, maybe even watch a television show recently or read a newspaper, and you will see scores of photographs and stories about electric vehicles frozen in place as a result of storms. You'll see electric vehicles surrounded by water, low-lying water, that can't work because of these issues from coast to coast. This is the left trying to lead a policy through 30-second soundbite instead of science. If you think about it, you just added of how this is going to hurt mom and pops at the kitchen table now with them trying to impose this on agriculture. First, the government is telling you now must use these type of renewable energies and these type of vehicles without being tested. They want to ban natural gas for stoves. And if they want to switch over completely 100% to renewables, that's a minimum. And if not in excess of a $5 trillion switch. And where is this? This is a 30-second soundbite being leading instead of science, because the science has not caught up to what we have. And on top of that, no matter if we did everything that the Paris Accords had stated, and the United States participated, I think it was Eric or yourself that brought it up the last time we were together, there would be no impact to climate change right now globally, because two of the biggest polluters, two of the biggest contributors of that, China and India, still have not taken part in this process.
Eric.
On top of that, the developing world is more interested in feeding its people than worrying about the quote-unquote climate, because they live in poverty and fossil fuels are much more efficient, much less expensive. But the truth of the matter is, look, there's climate change. There's no question about it. But the open question is, to what degree does man contribute? But even if we contributed 100%, to Jesse's point, if we stopped using fossil fuels in its entirety tomorrow, it will make absolutely no difference. Because, as John Kerry himself pointed out, and if the United States lived up to its obligations under the Paris Accords, it would have no impact. So why are we doing this? I submit it has nothing to do with the climate. I believe it is an attempt at a government takeover of the energy sector of the United States. That is what they want to do. If they truly believe that climate was the existential threat that they claim, then why aren't we using nuclear power? It's one of the few green sources of energy, non-fossil fuel sources of energy, that actually works and that actually could power our grid. But it is not considered green. Why? Because if you have that, if you use it, there's no longer a crisis. And if it's not a crisis, then you don't need government intervention. Liquefied natural gas. Natural gas has very little carbon footprint. It's a huge, vast improvement over the burning of fossil fuels. And yet, the Biden administration just outlawed the exportation of liquefied natural gas. Well, who does that benefit? Russia. So Joe Biden is going to drive up the cost of energy, help Russia fund its war against Ukraine. It's also going to drive up the price of oil so that Iran, when it illegally exports its oil, and Russia will have additional revenues to fund their drones and their proxy wars. And then, of course, they will then turn around and give a discount to the Chinese because we're not imposing the sanctions on Iran. They're exporting their oil. They're exporting their oil to China. This has nothing to do with the climate. This is all about a government control and takeover of the energy sector. Let's keep in mind, a crisis. You should never let a crisis go to waste. So even when there's not a crisis, they must create a crisis. Look, you don't sell your house and then become homeless. You sell your house when you have a place to move. The green agenda, as laudable as it may be, simply is not ready. Solar, wind, it is simply not ready. You want to get to that point? Well, great. But that's 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, maybe. But it is not working now. And we're destroying we're weakening America abroad and destroying the American economy at home. It makes no sense.
All right, gentlemen, I want to turn our attention to the cancer of wokeness. It's part of the discussion that we've been having. It's all coming out of this left-wing progressive movement. But one piece of it that concerns me enormously is the indoctrination of our youth. It's happening in college campuses, in graduate schools, medical schools, law schools. It's gone all the way down to the public school. It's all about controlling language, thought, speech, therefore thinking, and therefore action. And I believe that when you destroy a meritocracy and you do everything by numbers based on sexual identity, racial identity, gender identification, what you're doing is you're destroying quality and professionalism and responsibility. Do you really want to have so many air pilots who are black, Latino, Asian, or white and broken out? And if you go over the numbers of white, do you really want to have people who are not qualified to fly those planes? God forbid if one of your children had to have brain surgery. Do you really want to have the kid who got into medical school based on her ability and her talents and her brains? Or do you want to get the one to fill a racial quota? It makes us weaker in terms of performance of important services in our lives, but it also makes us weaker against our international competitors who do not believe in this nonsense, who reject this nonsense, and who are making their kids smarter and tougher in the international competition. Jesse, what do you say?
Well, I completely agree. I think that you see this wokeness and this end of meritocracy as combined, because as you pointed out, it is happening in our schools. They're looking to, in our schools, they're looking to end, programs like honors programs and and those for the best and the brightest. And it's almost now school is like a participation. You get a participation trophy. It's not energizing the ingenuity and the entrepreneurism that's inbred in Americans. And I really do think it's a loss of the goal of education, the acquisition of further knowledge. And we see this everywhere else. And I'm going to tell you, I believe that the big partners here are big tech and the government moving forward, because they rather play identity politics than to have the best and the brightest being put forward. And it's everything in America now, according to the left, has to be about identity politics in this woke agenda. I mean, these elites, this deep state, the big tech, they're the ones who create a cancel culture. They want everyone to be like in 1984, where they control everything. There's no one that sticks out there. The new entrepreneurs, the new people who are going to, take business and take technology and science and art to the next level. They don't want that. They want everyone to get a participation trophy. You just come in and you get what you get because you showed up. That's not the American spirit. That's not the American spirit at all. And what's even worse is through this process, this cancel culture, this woke, what you're doing is you're actually you're restricting free speech, and you're restricting free thought, and you're restricting the entrepreneurial spirit and the American exceptionalism that has made this country great. And that's the goal of liberals and the left. They want everyone just to show up. They want everyone dependent on the government. They want the government to become a nanny state. And if you disagree with them, they're going to cancel you, because you can't even make a joke now. It's amazing that now even comedians have to watch out what they say. I guess it's okay to make fun of Republican presidents on Saturday Night Live, but if you do something that's not right, maybe based on race or gender identity, all of a sudden you get canceled, and that's wrong.
Eric?
I remember when I was in college, it was great to go see comedians show up on college campuses and tell these jokes. Now comedians don't even go on college campuses because the audience has no sense of humor. It's horrible. Look, diversity, equity, inclusion. It's diversity in anything but thought. You're just not allowed to disagree with us. Equity, you have to have this, this guaranteed equal outcome. That's the Soviet model. The American model is equal opportunity. And inclusion. If you agree with us, you can be included. Look, DEI is by its nature racist and anti-Semitic because it views everything through the lenses of race and gender. You are no more than what your race and gender is. I mean, Martin Luther King had it right. That used to be the gold standard. You are judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. This turns it completely on its head. You are only judged by the color of your skin or your gender. The content of your character is irrelevant because it's defined by what the color of your skin is or what your gender is. So that's where you end up. I mean, I happen to think it's unconstitutional because everything is based on race. America is supposed to be a colorblind society, and everyone is supposed to have an equal opportunity.
Equal protection under the laws.
Exactly. And to the extent that there is not equal protection under the laws, then it falls on the Justice Department and law enforcement to make sure those laws are enforced. But you don't solve the problem of racism by being racist and reverse racism. Everybody has to be treated equally. And that was the genius of Martin Luther King, because it resonated with all the American people. And that's what we got to get back to.
All right, we're taking a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, distinguished attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us. We'll be back for our final segment in just a few moments.
This is Let the Record Show.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Ray Dalio, legendary investor and New York Times best-selling author, wants to pass along his understanding of how countries go broke, because he believes the U.S. budget and debt situation needs to be addressed. To give you that knowledge, he has put the draft of his book, How Countries Go Broke, The Big Cycle, online for free. It's available now at economicprinciples.org.
So
Missing out on family time because of all the noise? Enjoy the moment without straining to keep up with the conversation.
Wow, what a beautiful sunset.
Discover Nuance Audio, the new invisible hearing solution that's built into your glasses. Discreet, comfortable, and easy to use. Nuance Audio glasses help you hear better and reduce background noise, so you can get back to enjoying time with your loved ones. Find a store near you at nuanceaudio.com.
Clorox Scentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Scentiva. Available in Clorox Scentiva Lavender-Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves.
Just a little further. You got this.
That we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. We're back. We've had a very interesting conversation about age. Eric was very kind to me just now. Jesse was very diplomatically silent on the issue about the difference in ages in this group.
I qualify for Medicare.
Well, that's okay. As long as I still remember what Medicare is, I guess I'm okay. All right, so let's begin this segment. Jesse, George Soros is pouring enormous amounts of money into political campaigns and social policies all across America. It started with district attorneys and secretaries of state. Now he's throwing this enormous amount of money into this year's elections with respect to House of Representative candidates and Senate races. And his latest gambit is he's trying to change the state of Texas from red to blue. So what are your thoughts on that, Jess?
Well, I think we've seen this systematically gone underway by George Soros. I mean, there was a 2023 report that indicated that in just about 8 states, George Soros spent somewhere in the area of about $40 million on leftist DAs. Some of those DAs are like our New York Attorney General, who ran on a platform of indicting and arresting and convicting Donald Trump, which is completely contrary to, I guess, the oath that she's supposed to take. Locally, we see the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, who decides not to prosecute those who commit any crimes. But if you look at this is a part and parcel of establishing woke prosecutors and part and parcel of defending the police. What's going to do is the left wants the criminals to run riot and allow anarchists to rule the streets. I mean, just this week, we saw two New York City police officers beaten by, I think what was identified as illegal migrants in Times Square. Now, I'm fortunate, and I think if you live in Long Island, we are fortunate that we have two outstanding district attorneys. They're professional prosecutors who truly take their oath to heart. That's Suffolk District Attorney Ray Tierney and Nassau District Attorney Ann Donnelly. These are individuals that are working against the leftist type of legislation that is in place that basically handcuffs district attorneys, handcuffs judges, and handcuffs judges and cops, like cashless bail. But that's not where they're stopping. We need, in localities and states like this, the death by dealer statute, especially with the Biden administration and the Democrats leaving the southern borders open. Fentanyl is flooding into our community streets, and it's killing our kids. It's killing and raising destruction upon families. And just look at this. Soros also has been moving forward, and I think he backed 75 prosecutors back in the day that were leftists, and has spent $53 million in 9 states. Just look at these states, and that's where they are. And it's interesting where they are. There are states like New York, 2 in Virginia, Missouri, Illinois, Pennsylvania, 3 in Texas, and of course the district attorney in the city and Los Angeles County.
Don't forget Portland. Don't forget Portland and Seattle. Portland, Seattle.
Portland and Seattle on top
L.A.
of
and San Francisco. Everywhere he spent money, or his front groups spent money. You see, part of it has to do with he's been funding these front groups that pour the money in with wonderful names to control the narrative. And these are very dangerous groups. When they take over the DA's office, they control the whole issue of public safety and public prosecution of crime. It's horrible. Eric.
Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help when you have a city council that has overrode a veto of the mayor, which will require the New York City Police Department to document absolutely every single interaction they have with a civilian. Every single one. There's not going to be any more policing. Because every time you just walk up to someone and just start chatting with them, you're at risk that you're going to have to, start filling out paperwork. Overtime alone, we're not going to be able to afford it. But the cops are going to be spending all their time filling out paperwork rather than enforcing the law and keeping us safe. But this is all part and parcel of being pro-criminal and decriminalization of basically everything, other than perhaps maybe the most serious violent crimes.
I just have a quick question. And Judge, you were a municipal lawyer at the highest levels. Eric, you're an esteemed lawyer. I have to imagine that there's got to be a collective bargaining problem here, because that is change of work in the way that they're doing. I mean, I think there may be a play here where the union can try and derail that activity here in New York City, as opposed to what the city council overriding the mayor's veto, which I completely agree with the mayor's veto on this.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory. I would take any effort to stop this from coming to play. 2 things that definitely happen here. Number one, you're going to waste time on the street when they should be doing real policing. And what the so-called level 1 stop, that's what they call a common law right of inquiry. It's not a big deal. You just say, did you see somebody running down the street? Which way did he go? You'd have to record that. Right, that takes time.
But what makes it worse, tying back to what we were discussing before, part of what they have to figure out, part of what they have to document is, I spoke to a black man. I spoke to
who was age
Asian
47.
Woman. Yeah, they have to.
They were 5'10".
Yeah, they have to go into this absolute incredible detail about everyone they spoke to. Isn't that I spoke to some citizen who told me?
Okay. And then they have to make this. Then they have to go back and do the reporting in the precinct house, which takes cops off the street. It's just absolute asinine, gentlemen. Go ahead, Jess.
One more thing. I mean, and the only reason I say about change of work or change of work procedures is because I know that locally in different counties, when body cameras were introduced to the police forces and law enforcement groups in those counties, that it had to be collectively bargained. This almost seems like it's
Jesse, I think that's a brilliant. I have to tell you, in this conversation, there are 2 lawyers and 1 brilliant guy. And you're the brilliant guy in this conversation because I like that idea.
It's time to get a new room then.
So I am telling you, I'm going to bring that up to the appropriate persons to take a look at that. I think it's a wonderful idea, Jesse. Good for you. And
what do I know?
And Eric and I thank you very, very much for our continuing education.
And if everybody likes it, we're going to take credit for it.
That's right. Who's this guy? Who's this guy, Jesse Garcia? No, talking about shamelessness. Let's talk about the shameless political strategy of the Democratic Party, where they try to get the most extreme characters to run in primaries in the Republic. So they put a lot of money into Republican primaries to get the worst possible Republican candidate.
They meaning Democrats try to get
Chuck Schumer. Yeah. Chuck Schumer and his crew try to get the worst possible Republican to win the primary in a state, and that person then goes against a Democrat, making the race easier for the Democrat to win so that Schumer and Democrats can control the Senate, for example. And they do that in the House races, too. Now, why do I call this shameless? Because what they're doing is, if these so-called MAGA Republicans, these right-wing Republicans, are so bad, why are they spending money and effort trying to foster them in primaries? And maybe, who knows, they might even win. And then what do? They're fostering people who they say are inherently evil on the populace. I mean, and they're contrary to their own so-called values. So, Jesse, what do you say about that?
Whether we like it or not, I believe it's a sound strategy, a political strategy on behalf of the Democrats. The problem is the Republican parties in those communities need to be calling out the fact that these candidates are backed by the left and the Soros and the Democrats for the purposes of being disruptors, not people who want to be part of a collective Republican Party that's going to be serving the peoples and is in tune with our ideals. You know, it's something that we've seen. I think the Democrats in 2022 in the midterms spent $19 million in 8 different states regarding that. So it's amazing how we can see that happens in such. But it's inherent upon that organization, the organization in the state, the organization in the county, and dare I say, because here in the state of New York, the way we have it down, the organization at the town level for them to run effective primaries, despite the money, because you got to remember, a primary brings out just a small percentage of the vote. And political parties have the ability to drive out that vote as well. It's not just big money that does that. In fact, a perfect example, we had an outsider with special interests in the cryptocurrency lobby that was dropped into New York 1 in eastern New York.
In Suffolk County.
Ran against our candidate, Nick Lalotta. They outspent us 4-1. And they were backed by a special interest for the cryptocurrency lobby that was actually backing more Democrats than Republicans. But in this case, this was the one Republican they were choosing. 4-1, we were outspent, yet we won that primary decisively by like 63% of the vote. It comes down to your party organization and the party selection that you have to do.
Eric.
Yeah, you see this playing out all the time. In Montana, for instance, there's one Senate candidate for the Senate, Tim Sheehy from the Republican line, but it's very conceivable that a fellow Matt Rosendale may get into the race and primary him. Who's Matt Rosendale? Matt Rosendale is one of those wingnutts one of the crazy 8. Yeah, lunatic, who would not vote for Kevin McCarthy in the first go-around to make him speaker. He was one of the 5 holdouts. Then he was one of the Looney Tunes who voted to vacate the chair. And then he was one of the wingnuts that made it almost impossible to elect a new leader. So he may well primary Sheehy. Now, in full disclosure, I've raised money for Tim Sheehy. I'm a supporter of Tim Sheehy, and I hope he wins. But Rosendale is being funded in part by Chuck Schumer and some of these organizations you're talking about. But on top of that, Jesse, to your point, Republicans need to be smart. Well, it doesn't help when you have idiots like Matt Gaetz, who is the lead wingnut, going out to Montana to campaign for him and support him.
Rosendale, that is.
To support Rosendale. Correct. So you kind of have this unholy alliance between, Chuck Schumer's money and jerks like Matt Gaetz going out to support wingnuts like Matt Rosendale to undermine really strong candidates like Tim Sheehy because it's so critical for Republicans to retake the Senate. So let's not give all the credit to Chuck. The Republicans play a big role in undermining their agenda.
All right. Jesse, I want to get your thoughts. You brought this up in an earlier conversation today. There's a hearing going on in the United States Senate with respect to the social media, the tech giants like Meta and TikTok and others. And these social media giants have a real responsibility with respect to child exploitation. What can you tell our audience about that?
Yeah, today before the Senate Judiciary Committee, or this week, the chief executive officers of the major social media networks, Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, X, TikTok, Snapchat, Discord, and others, spoke before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And they were specifically regarding the exploitation of children and making their platforms almost addictive to children without controls, and that has led to some problems. One of those problems is the death of a young man. I'm trying to find his name right now. As I look at it, but what happened is this young man was being bullied, and he was being extorted that if he did not pay a certain amount of money, some unflattering photographs of him were going to be released. He paid that money, but it wasn't enough. It led to his suicide. And I believe it was properly said that the blood of this young man's death is on the hands of those CEOs, because there was recently released internal memorandums and emails from Facebook and Instagram, Meta, where they were talking about this type of issue. And one of the things that have come up is that these big tech companies there's a way to ease or pause or silence the program, but what they don't do, they don't make it as a default. They make it as it's hidden, so you can't do it. And it really leads to this. Now, remember, whether you like the decision or not, the United States government moved in. They identified through science and research and the reports from the own tobacco makers that there was addictive properties to their tobacco, that they be used for marketing purposes. It's the same type of actions that's taken here.
It's funny. One of the articles I looked at when you raised the issue for us, Jesse, a lot of these posts have to do with suicide, self-harm, eating disorders.
Eating disorders is a biggie, particularly amongst young girls. It's incredible.
So, I mean, these are serious matters. And they are exploiting. And there's also the sexual exploitation of children, people getting hooked up with people who are predators on these sites. I mean, this is serious business. So what should be done about this, Jesse?
I think what needs to be done about it, I think, listen, one thing and another. You got to remember, we focus a lot on this, on how these big tech companies, and they've been caught, censoring conservative voices and placing their thumb on the scale. Now we see them where they're going after children. And I'll be honest with you, I do not know what the answer is. I am reticent about getting the government involved in any type of private industry. But these are CEOs that are running amok. It's a business. It's a profitable business. We understand that. But there's got to be things that need to be done here to help prevent this from happening. And the young man that died, his name was Gavin Guffey. He was the son of a South Carolina state Republican representative, Brandon Guffey. And they're suing Instagram for the suicide of their 17-year-old son. And I mean, it's heart-wrenching of how this goes. I mean, I don't know what we can do, but I do know one thing. The one thing that this has in common, as well as the protections that conservatives have been calling for in terms of big tech placing their thumb on the scales, is maybe we need to look at the repeal of Section 230 of the Title 47 of the New York State Code, which gives these big tech companies liability shields of what's placed on their platforms. I think maybe they're held liable more. They're going to be able to help, or maybe for their own business practices, prevent these type of activities and base their algorithms based on usage, as opposed to trying to make it profiteering and make it addictive to young minds. And maybe, there's a state that's around looking at it, it escapes me at the moment, that is almost like banning social media from anyone under 16 because of the developing minds and the influence that they have on these young people. And I think we have to put everything on the table when it comes down to, more importantly, to the development and the protection of our children.
Well, it's they always raise the flag of the First Amendment, but let's be clear what the First Amendment is. First Amendment is a protection against government action on freedom of speech. And it is not an absolute protection. You can have reasonable regulations as to time, place, and manner. If you're talking about the public health and the public safety of our children and you have a reasonable regulation, then I think that makes sense to be looked at. If you have a problem, as pointed out in these Senate hearings, and you've pointed out, Jesse, if you've had this problem, it's not enough to say, well, nothing I can do about it. There's the First Amendment. That's acting as if the First Amendment is an absolute per se shield against any regulation. It is not an absolute shield against any regulation. I don't know. I'm not a technological expert, but maybe there's ways of controlling the devices by cutoff switches, or you need some sort of code that doesn't come through the parent. I don't know how one would do this technologically, but I think parents need to know. Just like parents need to know if their kid is being manipulated into an operation changing their sexual identities, and that the parents have a right to know this stuff, and schools and the government have an obligation to make sure the parents know so they can help their kids deal with these difficult issues. Similarly, if they're being bullied, manipulated, exploited on the media, parents should have a right to know too, and maybe that's the way to deal with the First Amendment issues. Eric?
I just find it difficult to believe that if there's information being disseminated that we can prove scientifically and through studies that are damaging to our youth, that there's no regulation that could be passed to prevent that. We're against drug abuse, right? We don't want teenagers shooting up heroin. And these are kinds of drugs. These are addictive. And if it makes young girls have serious body image issues and fosters eating disorders or encourages suicide, I find it very difficult to believe that there's no role for government in that, because that's just harmful speech.
Well, gentlemen, another interesting hour on Let the Record Show. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, esteemed commentator, political essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to being with you again next week on Let the Record Show. Thank you for listening.